like many gamers, when I was younger I played Risk, the game of colossal armies clashing over territories on a giant map, a game of all-out war between little plastic people. Unfortunately, Risk can take longer than some actual wars, so I needed something that was scratched the same itch but was a bit more snappy and didn't take quite so long. Let me introduce you to Nexus Ops. Similarly to WizWar, Nexus Ops is one of Fantasy Flight's makeover games, where they've taken an old title, in this case from 2005, and given it their new component treatment. Now, the original endeared itself to its fans because of the clear components, which were crystal plastic and really smelled, but also glowed under blacklight, and it gave the fans of the game a particular sort of fondness for it, so a redesign with new pieces was never exactly going to go down well. That said, Nexus Ops is completely untinkered with in its mechanics and rules. Unlike WizWar, which came with a new set of rules and the originals as a variance in the back of the book, Nexus Ops is the opposite way around. You've got the rules pretty much as is, but with some extra variant things tucked away at the back if you want to try them. Physically, it's usable, I would say. The board is a kind of polychromatic hexagon puke plate. The miniatures are quite nice actually, I like them. They're in rather naff pastel shades, but they're certainly easy to distinguish from one another. And one of the really nice things they've done is that the size goes up, as does the attack value. So if you line them up in a row, you can see that the humans are smallest and the rubium dragons are largest, which means that when you cast an eye across the board, although it might be a little visually offensive to some people, it's very easy to see what the terrain is, what the units are, and where everything is at a glance. So, while it's perhaps not to everybody's tastes, it certainly is very, very sensible design to me. Now, the miniatures have been a point of contention. Some people don't like them and see them as a grim, gritty redesign. Personally, I think they're fantastic. Even the tiny little humans are beautifully detailed, and the really cool thing is that all of the monsters feel like proper, crazy sort of sci-fi, like the sort of thing you'd see on 70s album covers or old sci-fi artwork. I love the fact that the rubium dragon has a cluster of eyes and dragonfly wings. It's, you know, not some scaly reptilian thing, it's like a bizarre sort of oversized insect. Each of them has got a really nice feel of its own, and you have a lot of strange creatures. You've got the puny humans at one end and the rubium dragon at the other, but in between you'll find rock striders with their spidery legs and the crystalline beings and the fungoid men. It's a fantastic sort of mix of interesting different races, different creatures, rather than just your kind of standard, you know, fantasy factions in space that 40k fed us. Nexus Ops has got this lovely, varied and weird sci-fi feel, and it makes it feel weirdly unique. It's not as po-faced as a lot of other games. So apart from the actual sort of component design, the actual game itself, I mean, it's nice for one really solid reason, and that is, unlike a lot of other dudes on a map game, the whole thing is geared around winning combat. You can't turtle, you can't hole up in one place and defend yourself. You're not about grabbing and holding territories, it's very fluid. You start off with 3 home hexes where you spawn your creatures and where you can mine rubium, which is it's kind of like the currency of the game. It's your sort of MacGuffin mineral which you dig out the ground and spend to buy more creatures. But as you expand into the map, you will find more mines, you'll find more units, so you don't have to turtle on your home space, because turtling will not win you the game. You only win victory points, of which you need 12, by fighting battles and fulfilling your mission objectives, which are mainly about fighting battles. So the whole thing is all about getting out there, getting into fights and winning. The other nice thing, which I just touched on, the mission objective cards. This is what mixes it up and makes it more than just a rolling dice against your buddies thing. You have secret missions. Some of them come into play after you've won a fight, some of them are about having particular hexes under your control. It's a really nice thing where you're not only trying to manoeuvre your forces into the right place to win, but you're also got these extra little sort of bonus points you can grab by just, you know, for example, fighting in a particular terrain, using a particular mix of units. And it really makes it interesting, because nobody else knows what you're doing, but they might be able to guess after a few games once they know the cards. And 12 victory points is not that many when some of the cards score 3, each battle gets you 1. 12 can be racked up quite fast, which brings me on to another thing. Nexus Ops plays an hour and a half maximum. You can get a game in probably 45 minutes to an hour if you all know what you're doing, and it's not a complicated game. Basically, the larger the unit is, that'll attack first. So the Rubium Dragon needs like a 2+ and attacks first, then you go down and down and down, and you only fight one round of combat. If at the end it's a draw, it's a draw. If you win, great, you get a victory point. And the loser is compensated by being given energize cards, which are one-off bonuses. So you can't fall down and get, basically completely squashed out of the game. Incidentally, if somebody is completely eliminated and can't buy more units, the game ends, so there is no real player elimination. So it's really nice, you don't get so much of the sort of poorer player being beaten on, and if 3 people are beating on 1 player, they're racking up loads and loads of energize cards, and they can play some insane things on the next turn to get themselves back in the game. It's a nice balancing mechanism. Now the other thing that's important in Nexus Ops is the map itself. As I've mentioned, it's vibrant, but it's also small. It's similar to Hiroshima Hex, which is another combat game in a very enclosed space. They've deliberately not given you much room to manoeuvre and much room to work in. There's enough that you're not always on each other's toes, but not quite enough that you're going to be comfortably distant from each other. Not that that matters in a game that's mostly about combat. But the centre of the map is the Monolith. Again, a design thing. The original had a monolith that was raised above the board, which everybody liked, but at the same time you could not see beyond it. You'd have to go round the table to see what's on the other side of the monolith. So they flattened it. The monolith is now just the same height as everything else. Some people don't like that. Personally, I don't care less. It's still clearly the middle of the board. It's clearly the monolith. I don't mind. But the Monolith, if you control it, you will get some energize cards. There is a variant where you can play King of the Hill and it scores victory points for staying on the Monolith. Well, that's a nice idea, but again, it's just a variant. You can play it if you like. And there's also a variant that means the middle of the board becomes a swirling vortex that sucks things in and spits them out at random, just in case the Monolith is something you'd rather leave out once in a while. So there is a small degree of take and hold if you want to sit on the Monolith, but to be honest, nobody's going to let you, and it's in the middle of the board, equidistant from all players. Now you can have 2 through to 4 players. Downtime's not much of an issue. I think 3 players is possibly where I like it best. But there's not really a lot more to say about Nexus Ops. The creatures are interesting because it's not just a difference of initiative and dice roll. Initially, humans, by the way, humans are rubbish. They're rubbish. They attack last and have to get a 6 to hit anything. On a lucky roll, you can still take out the biggest creature in the game, but they are rubbish. So they've also got some abilities. Well, most of them do. Your 3 smallest units can mine, so if you sit them on a mine, they can get themselves some rubium. Next turn, you can buy more units and send them onto the board. The bigger units, although they can't mine, you have the rock striders that can move faster over rock terrain. You have the lava leapers who are at home in the magma pools, and the Rubium Dragon can go anywhere on the board from the Monolith, and also has an attack for an adjacent square wherever it lands. So there's a little bit to mix them up, and quite nicely Fantasy Flight have given you a completely optional set of extra units if you just flip the reference card over. So you can teach this one quite fast. I think you could quite easily play it with kids who are around the age of 11, even maybe younger even, I don't know, but you could certainly play it with kids. You can play it with basically anybody who's got any sort of interest in dudes on a map combat and doesn't want to play it for too long. Because like I said at the beginning, this is the thing I really like about Nexus Ops, is it's totally geared towards fighting to get points to win and to do it quite quickly. Because almost every game I've played of this type, unless it's a particularly different design like Cyclades or Kemet or something like that, they tend to go like this. I build some units, I send them, they do battle, they win a territory, and then they win some more territories, and then somebody else wins them all back again, and then somebody else wins some, and then you win them off them, and basically it's just a constant back and forth war of attrition, and it does my head in, to be honest. I like games where dudes are on a map. War of the Ring, for example, is a great game that I don't get to play half as much as I'd like to. But Nexus Ops does a brilliant job of hitting the sweet spot of a dudes on the map game where you get to roll dice and you get to gauge the probability and try and get your army units mixed right and in the right place and on the right home terrain. There is a lot of randomness in the card draws and the dice rolls, sure. You might get duff cards, but you can cash them in for rubium if you want, so they're not entirely useless. But it does it in an hour. You can play this game and get a satisfying, solid game for an hour. I am glad that Fantasy Flight have included some variants, because really I can't say that this one is going to be a game of endless appeal. I do think you could get worn out on it, but it's not a game that's supposed to be played over and over and over again. You get it out and play an hour and enjoy it, and play it again periodically, but it's not one you're going to be going against, because it's not short enough to be filler, and it's not long enough to be an event game. So, Nexus Ops. It does the great job of scratching the risk itch in a much shorter time, in a very fun and very nicely produced, but also not too busy, very usable way. I think it's quite very accessible. I'm certainly happy, being somebody with wonky colourblind eyes, that it's very visually easy for me. Good for randomness, not too much in the way of take that cards and the sort of nasty competition, but it's a very much a conflict game. The only caveat is it's not easy to get this for a cheap price. If you go after a copy of the original, you can probably get that for anything like 10 quid. This version racks more up in the 40 range. It's an expensive game, and really I'm not entirely sure that price is a good one. If you could get it for 35 second hand maybe, I'd say that's fair. 30-35 quid's about the target you want to be going for this. So yeah, Nexus Ops, dudes on a map, plays in a short time, quite good fun, probably not going to rock your world though. Thanks for watching, I'll see you next time.